Okay, everybody. Well, it is 2 o'clock my time, and every time Laura has said 1 o'clock, it's made me feel like I'm an hour late. Late for my own funeral type of person. But welcome, everybody, to the Pinnacle Financial Partners quarterly educational event from the Health and Benefits team. And our webinar today is What's the ROI of HSAs? Calculating the value for employers and participants. One of our core values here at Pinnacle is learning, which is why we are really passionate about hosting these events and why we continue to offer these. Pinnacle is a top 50 bank. We're headquartered in Nashville, Tennessee, and we're located all across the Southeast. We offer a full range of banking, investment, trust, and mortgage products to employer groups and individuals who want a comprehensive relationship with their financial institution. I love disclaimers. I'm not going to read this whole thing to you, but the information that we talk to you about today and that we provide to you today may change tomorrow. So this is what we know to be true as of today, which is May 11th, 2022. Additionally, the information that we provide to you is for tax and educational purposes. We're not giving you specific legal tax or educational advice. So Laura and I, if you've been to any of our webinars before, you probably know Laura and myself. Laura is a health and benefits advisor for our team. She gives advice on how folks can best maximize their employees' pre-tax benefit plans and save their employees and themselves a ton of money. And I am the compliance officer on our team, and collectively we have about 28 years of experience in this space. And the star of the show today, Kevin, who is like my new famous friend, thanks for coming, Kevin, is the executive director and the founder of both the American Bankers Association Health Savings Account Council and the Office of Insurance Advocacy. He represents both before Congress and the federal government, which is awesome. He has more than 30 years experience in the financial services industry and in the insurance advocacy space. He's nationally recognized, that's why I say he's my new famous friend, as an expert in insurance, health insurance in particular. And he's the winner of the 2011 Public Policy Leadership Award from the Institute of Healthcare Consumerism. And he is a frequent expert voice in the media and public hearings and has testified before Congress before and on cable news on several occasions. So Kevin, welcome. Again, super stoked that you're here.
Thank you very much for having me. We look forward to today's opportunity to talk to your clients.
Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. Yes, excited to have you. I will get started with kind of setting the stage of what the presentation today is going to be about, and then I will frequently call on Kevin throughout the webinar to ask him questions and give him commentary, give his commentary during the webinar. I also invite you, there is a Q&A section that you should be able to find on the left-hand side of your WebEx. Feel free to send us questions throughout the webinar, and we'll try to touch on some of those at the end. So if those of you joining us today, if y'all are business owners or work in HR, this is probably what the last 2.5 years have felt like for you. The pandemic has really taken us into uncharted territory and likely hit you with new challenges nearly every day. Then as we start to see recovery and return to a new normal, then we get hit with the Great Resignation and labor shortages. It seems like the hottest topic right now at each HR conference, webinar, or seminar I've attended in the last 9 months or so has centered around recruitment and retention strategies. We've seen our clients and heard from the insurance brokers that we work with that their employers are all looking for new ways to enhance the benefit packages so that they have a better chance of stealing talent away from their competitors. No doubt there are lots of different ideas being thrown around, which makes it even harder to decide what to do, and that's if you have the budget to do something. I know I was speaking to a lady just the other day who owns a business in the restaurant industry, and she said, Laura, labor costs have, shot up like 35%, and it seems like it's just overnight. She has found her best labor demographic to be mothers, and so we were strategizing on some of the different ways that she can utilize HSAs and dependent care FSAs to structure her benefit package so that it attracts that type of talent. And so as companies look to enhance their benefits, there are two other trending topics that we are seeing, which are how do we help our employees with their mental wellness and their financial wellness? And while I can't say that we have the end-all be-all answer for you today, I do think we have a compelling argument for one thing that you can look at enhancing within your organization's benefit package that offers return on investment for the company and helps to meet your employees' wants and needs. Our webinar today is going to focus on health savings accounts and why they may be the most powerful and impactful tool you have to help your employees and your company in this current environment. We're going to start by zeroing in on the advantages for an employer to offer a high deductible health plan and promote health savings accounts. We find the HSA advantages for both employers and employees are often overlooked and underutilized. Even though HSAs have been in existence since 2003, folks across the board are still severely undereducated, and this needs to change. So let's talk about why they matter for employers. They are a tax benefit to your employees and a tool just like their 401k that can help them to prepare for retirement. Promoting, educating, and investing in HSAs for your employees can promote financial wellness, mental, and physical. They are also easy to administer and easy to utilize for your participants. And HSA contributions are taken pre-tax, so you pay less taxes. And we want to show you more of what that means today. Let's start by looking here at this example. So the IRS has the 2022 limits at $3,650 for an individual and $7,300 if you are on a family plan. You are also able to contribute an additional $1,000 if you are age 55 years or older. That's significant when it comes to what your employees can contribute pre-tax. But you may also potentially be missing out on some of the other benefits that you may pair with that HSA offering, which is also dependent care, which brings potentially an additional $5,000 in pre-tax contributions, and also limited purpose FSAs, which someone can contribute up to $2,852. Both of these benefits pair really nicely with a health savings account, and with the right education, I think you can help your participants maximize their utilization. That brings you to potentially $15,150 as a reduction of their taxable income. So let's take a look at what that really means to you. Right now, I am showing you this employer pre-tax calculator. On the left, the current employer group is sitting at an annual total of $50K in pre-tax contributions. And we're able to see their employer tax savings is sitting at about $5,500. This is through FICA, state unemployment, federal unemployment, and potential workers' comp savings. We've really tried to use conservative rate variables for our calculations, and you all will receive a copy of this calculator so that you can run the numbers for your organization after today's webinar. In the example on the right, we doubled up the employer's pre-tax contributions, which doubled the savings to a little over $11,000. And that's through employee contributions to these pre-taxed advantage accounts. Now, you may be thinking this is unreasonable to do, and for some of you, it may be. but for most, I think it's feasible with the right strategies, tools, and education, which we're going to spend more time on throughout the rest of the presentation. I realize these numbers aren't overly significant, but I would imagine that there is room for improvement for most to increase their pre-tax contributions, and it's going to give you the opportunity to show your employees you really care about their well-being. And so this brings me to my first question for Kevin. Kevin, what are your thoughts on this tax savings example? Are employers thinking in terms like this, and do you think they're maximizing their potential?
Good question, and one I don't want to answer that puts employers in a bad light, but the minutia of this is hard to understand for everyone. And what's missing is always a time component. In other words, adopting this strategy has the benefits you describe on the slide. Adopting this strategy next year for the next 5 years is a significant amount of money. And for small margin businesses, and they could be very big businesses, they just might be small margin businesses. For example, Dunkin' Donuts runs on a 6% margin. And so if you're able to realize a 10% savings through employee contributions, this would add up over time. The point of all HSA discussions really is to lift yourself up and out of the annual 12-month cycle of employee benefits and focus as best you can on the new world you'll be stepping into and what happens every year after that. And that's the perspective, the lens, if you will, that we encourage employers and employees to adopt when they're looking at slides like this. It's not just about this year, and it's not just about some of the things you've listed. What happens over time? What are the great behavior changes that happen over time? What are the other things that once people start thinking about reducing the surface area of their taxable wages, what other things do they want to add to that bucket to make the reductions even more meaningful? And so I like your slide because it helps people understand the potential of what's there in HSAs.
Fantastic. Thank you for that, Kevin. On this next slide, so a net promoter is someone who will talk positively about your business and proactively promote your business to your brand and really helps the growth of your business. Clients can be net promoters, but your biggest opportunity is to get your employees talking about you in a positive way. We've seen why it's meaningful to get them contributing, but guess what? Your contributions are meaningful too. Any employer contribution to an HSA is non-tax compensation, and your total contributions can be taken as a business deduction. Let me say that again. Any employer contribution to an HSA is non-tax compensation, and your total contributions can be taken as a business deduction. Why is that meaningful? It is an investment in their health and wealth. And there's some advantages there for you too. I also wanted to note that in these unprecedented times, it's easier to raise and lower an employer's HSA contribution than it might be to come back at a later date and lower their salary or hourly rate. Like I mentioned earlier, the lady in the restaurant industry has had to increase her employees' wages 35% over the past few months, and she may never have the opportunity to lower those back down. So, you know, possibly in thinking through this scenario, maybe long term you can't afford a sizable contribution to their HSA, but maybe short term you could put one in place to attract and retain employees. Like possibly you call it a post-pandemic bonus to help you take care of the health and wealth of your family. Employees don't love it when you give a benefit and take it away, but positioning this correctly could help promote being a company that cares about their employees and offer you a solution in this current labor market. And it could mean getting more participation from them as you highlight this benefit. Kevin, how do you see employer contributions impact participation amongst participants?
Another good question, and I think the heart of the matter, which is if you want employees to start thinking about how to take care of themselves and what working in your company means for their future, you have to start seeding the account. And when we started this effort in 2003 was when the law was passed. In 2004, the first benefit year, the rhetoric around it was to minimize the importance of the insurance itself and to maximize the cash that was going in. In full disclosure, I used to be a benefits broker in the 90s. And it wasn't a joke. I guess it was dark humor, because you used to talk about, well, I'm sorry, all this is going up. The drug prices are going up. We're going to have to change deductibles. And employee benefits discussions with employers were about things we're going to do to employees. Employee benefits discussions changed in the HSA world because you're finally doing something for them. That cash can't be taken away. It's non-forfeitable. And to your point, it starts accruing over time. It builds interest tax-free. It goes in tax-free. It comes out tax-free for qualified medical expenses. But the hidden fourth beauty of HSA contributions is that they are exempt from Social Security and Medicare taxes, which is to say every HSA dollar has a 7.65% advantage over every 401k dollar. And so my advisory license is behind me, and so I'm not offering this as a bit of advice that you can follow. I would say this: the folks that have those licenses might say that if you were going to start funding tax-advantaged accounts, you probably should fund your HSA first, because that's where the greatest number of tax advantages are. And for employers, well, where are the matches? Well, they're in the 401k. We're seeing them move now because there's tremendous advantages to the employer for moving them as well. As I said, we tried to stop the importance of insurance. We even called it a high deductible health plan, which is nobody's idea of a marketing triumph. We should have called it something else. But in the winter of 2003, we weren't as creative as we were hoping for. But the bottom line is, whatever your HSA compatible insurance is, we were trying to make that not the conversation. The conversation is wealth creation, behavior management, change over time, and ultimately employees that are looking forward to working in a company where they can measure the investment in you. It's measured in dollars and cents, and I'll offer one other anecdote. Public employee unions, especially teachers unions, have almost uniformly changed their plans to health savings account plans. And it may dawn on you why, which is an insurance policy is literally a phone book of promises. If something happens to you, we'll compensate you. How many dollars go in your HSA is a cash discussion. And employers, when they're confronting, say, where I live, Loudoun County, Virginia, Loudoun County School Board would go and negotiate with the teachers union, and how much is going to go into our accounts is the question. That's an investment, and it's one you can touch and you can feel, and you can log into your account and you can see it right away. Promising that you have an extra day if you're an expectant mother is a good idea, but it doesn't have the same kind of immediate effect on employee states of mind. And that's why I think cash contributions are so important for the employer and the employee.
Thank you, Kevin. I couldn't agree more. On this next slide, we are introducing some of the parameters around HSAs. So we are seeing the 2022 limits, and also 2023 limits just came out last week. So we thought it would be good to go ahead and introduce those to you all. We see our HSA contribution limits, the catch-up contribution, but right here, what I really want to hone in on are those high deductible health plan minimum deductibles. So for a health plan to qualify as a high deductible health plan, the minimum deductible for self-only coverage is $1,400, and for family, $2,800. I don't know about you, but I've seen PPO plans with higher deductibles than that. And then when you consider what you could put into the account as an employer contribution, it makes a really attractive benefit package, I think, because it's simple and easy to explain. Now, we did see those high deductible health plan minimum deductibles go through a small increase this year, as well as the contribution limits increased, and so did those maximum out-of-pockets. I really want to not spend too much time talking on this slide, but turn it over to Kevin to share his thoughts on these limits, how they've changed from where they started to where we are today, and how HSAs have evolved.
Happy to help. And I could just leave it at not much, but that's not a very descriptive answer. We were able to do the following, and it happened in 2006. There was an unrelated piece of legislation called the HOPE Act, and very much like how conservative members of the House in particular joined the movement in 2003 to bring HSAs into existence. That's important because at the time, recall, there was an effort to expand Medicare to include drugs. And conservative members of the House were very reluctant to do that. They did it, not so much with arm turning, but they did it because HSAs were attached to the bill. We went back a couple of years later and said the arbitrary way that contributions are established needs to go. And it needs to be coupled to at least something greater than your deductible. And so the first change was that you're allowed to contribute more than what your deductible is. And your point about the deductibles is a good one. The average deductible, according to the Kaiser Family Foundation, is more than $1,600. And so next year, for self-only, it's $1,500. In other words, the entire world is now becoming HSA eligible. And obviously, one of the efforts of our organization is to make that so that irrespective of whatever insurance you have, you can open and fund an HSA. The other thing to draw your attention to, and one that comes up, and there's as a criticism actually, and something we can address, I hope, coherently, is you're only allowed to contribute up to $7,750 if you're a family, but you've got an out-of-pocket maximum that's $15,000, and so there is a patch there where your tax-free contributions don't match your ultimate financial risk in any given plan year. And so we're fortunate there's two bills in the Senate that we've helped introduce that marries those up. And so hopefully our second big change in contributions over the arc of history here will be that you're allowed to contribute as much as your out-of-pocket costs are. And I would also point out those out-of-pocket costs, those are the maximum statutory limits. Most plans, including the one I have here at ABA, which is not a very big plan, our out-of-pocket maximums are significantly lower than the statutory out-of-pocket maximum, and within, luckily, my contribution range. And so that is the world we would like to see, where their out-of-pocket costs are covered by the tax advantage dollars that we set up in the first place. That was the vision. And so we do have this gap we have to close. But good news, there's some legislation that we hope makes it over the finish line that would accomplish just that.
Awesome, Kevin. My next example on the next slide definitely touches on what you just shared there as well. But I just wanted to take a moment to note that, you know, if you're uncertain if your health plan qualifies as a high deductible health plan, I just want to note that it can't have, that health plan can't have any first dollar coverage. So some PPO plans or traditional plans have deductibles that are over that $1,400 mark, but they have copays or co-insurance that pays part of the cost before the deductible is met. And so those don't qualify as HSA compatible. So definitely check with your health insurance broker or reach out to us if you have questions on that. I have this next slide, which shows what you may be up against right now, where, you know, we have this fight for talent, and you have to trust that the prospective employees and your current labor force is evaluating your health insurance or benefit offering to its full potential. And then they're looking at everything that's important, and they know how to do the math to figure out what the best option is for them. I want to tell a story of my own. Now, approximately 8 years ago, I was working for a Fortune 50 company who at the time did not offer a high deductible health plan. My only option there was like a good, better, best PPO plan. And so I had been enrolled in that for a number of years. decided to make a change and move to a different company. I moved to a privately held company. And when I was evaluating the two different insurance options, both were at similar costs to me, what my out-of-pocket costs for those premiums were going to be. And because I had recently had a baby and was familiar with what my max out-of-pocket was, that was definitely top of mind at the time. That's where I honed in at and looked to compare that new company to the former company that I was with. And both had a max out-of-pocket of $3,000. But the privately held company, theirs was a high deductible health plan, and it offered an $1,800 contribution to my HSA if I was on a family plan. So what that meant to me is that before, where I thought that I had this really rich $20 copay plan, you know, in a year that I maybe had a lot of medical expenses like having a child, my cost now would be $1,200 out of pocket to have a baby versus the $3,000. And I think that that was the example that Kevin was trying to share with aligning that max out of pocket and, you know, contribution amount and looking at what the employer might be contributing to design and develop a really rich, high deductible health plan paired with that HSA offering. And so just to go a little bit further, at that point in time, I did decide to make a contribution to my HSA, but I wasn't maxing it out, and I definitely could have been contributing more. But that privately held company, while they were doing some really smart things with their insurance, they weren't spending the time to educate participants on how HSA worked, that they are a retirement mechanism, and some of the long-term benefits, short and long-term. I had a neighbor that actually told me more about it, and with his advice, I went ahead and increased the contribution that I was making. So that just, to me, shows me a gap that employers have to fill. I encourage you all to try to keep your benefit offerings simple. Take time to educate not just your existing employees, but also those prospective people that you're looking to hire, and that you can't overlook that HSA factor. I know that sometimes people still think that those PPO plans are where it's at, but in this day and age with what people need to be tucking away for retirement, I just really feel strongly that everyone needs an HSA. And I know Kevin would agree.
I wish I had a tape of that. That was well said.
Awesome.
He's recording it.
Well, here on this next slide, we can see that employee contributions make up 61% of all contributions going into HSAs, with employer contributions sitting at 26%. So what this tells me is that if you're trying to stand out in the crowd, if you're trying to do something different, this is where it's at. This is an area of opportunity to differentiate yourself. And I have to ask Kevin, like, does this shock you at all? Do you feel like there's a call to action here?
There's something like that. Back to the example of teachers unions. They're not asking for no rational reason. They're asking for the most rational reason, which is what goes into the account is the whole game here, because the plan covers the differences in coverage pattern between a PPO and a high deductible health plan are de minimis. They're really not worth discussing. The differences in what you put in the account as an employer versus employer, mean the difference between attracting the kind of people you want and everybody else. And so when you see a slide like this, good news, people are using the accounts the way they're described. You have to reduce your taxable income footprint, and you have to put money away for your health care. And I encourage you to pay attention to the source information at the bottom of the slides. Devenir is a partner of HSA Council and studies the market. That's where this information comes from. They have interesting slides about maturation of account, they point out that the accounts are used almost exclusively for what they were designed. People put a lot of money in and they try to take out only that what they need. So there's an overhang later. Employers, this is your chance to figure out how to create better employees and to do what was discussed earlier. Make those people feel valuable. Make them feel like they're teammates. And if you can increase that 26% just a little bit farther, maybe become 1/3 of the average contributors, you'll find a qualitative difference in the kind of people that you can attract in recruitment, and you'll see a huge difference in the number of people that are retained by your company.
Thank you, Kevin. So here on this next slide, we're just looking at total assets of HSAs and how they've grown over the past 18 years. I also wanted to note there to the side, 401k contributions, while they have been in existence since 1978, are now sitting at 7.3 trillion assets. Kevin, what do you think we'll see with HSA balances over the next 20 years?
They're going to go up just like the 401k business, but not nearly as fast. As I said, you don't draw your money out of your 401k till you're retiring. And most HSA owners are drawing money out to pay for medical expenses, which is exactly as they're supposed to. However, there's a small group of people that are, and it's a very small group of people, no more than 3% of HSA owners are total savers and total investors. And so those green bars are going to be growing. The blue bars are going to be growing too. And interestingly, as you can see, the amount of money going in is greater than the amount of money going out holistically. But back to where we started the conversation, really you should be thinking about 3-year rolling averages as a person and as an employer. In other words, maybe you have a tough year. You have children. I have 3 children. Children use healthcare like people use buffets. You never know when you're going to be in the doctor's office. And so as they mature, that tends to get tamped down a little bit. So now you become a net saver. But you're using these accounts and they're going in and they're going out all the time. And so we'll eventually see much larger aggregate balances over time, but not right yet. I will note this though. We have calculated that HSA dollars go about 8% farther in retirement than 401k balances. And that's because of the nature of the tax breaks, even though you can only contribute a fraction of what you could max contribute to your 401k. This is significant because people are living longer, and the things you need in retirement, aren't bass boats and big screen TVs, although I think that'd be fabulous in the early retirement phase. The things you need in retirement are healthcare. Where are you going to get those dollars? And if you haven't paid attention yet, Social Security and Medicare are experiencing profound challenges. And so your choices really are, in an uncertain future, do I want a health plan that has a cash balance available? Or do I just want to start fresh every year? I don't think that's a hard choice at all.
I completely agree, Kevin. I find it encouraging that the balances have steadily grown year over year, but my biggest fear is that they haven't grown big enough and that people are going to look back in 20 years from now and wish they would have learned about these a lot sooner. So,
no question.
Definitely an area opportunity for employers. Now I want to discuss some strategies and ideas on how you can best build these benefits. And let's get started right here with pairing them with a dependent care and limited purpose FSA. So as I go through these, I'm going to try to give you all some pointers that may be helpful to building your benefits. The first one here, dependent care FSAs. I hear lots of reasons all the time for participants and from employers on why participation is low. There's no reason why anyone who has children or maybe elderly dependents that need care, there's no reason why people shouldn't be participating. And the reason why I hear a lot that they can't participate is because of kind of the the advance of funds where it's coming out of their paycheck and they are also paying the daycare center and they're trying to raise children and they don't have time to submit all those receipts and they can't go any period of time without that money. So here's my solution. Here's how you get people participating that works for them. Here at Pinnacle, we offer this recurring dependent care request form, and so the participant can take it to their daycare provider before the plan year even begins and have them fill this out and sign off on it, turn it over to us, and what it does is it sets it up so that as the dependent care deduction happens in payroll, it's directed to their dependent care account and then auto reimburse the participant. If that participant has direct deposit set up, then they will be reimbursed automatically within 2 business days. If that's still not good enough, if they can't go those 2 business days from their check date to when they're going to get that reimbursement, we can still address that. We can put their dependent care contributions in a little bit earlier so that they're receiving that reimbursement on the same day as their check date. And that's meaningful because the people who are check to check and choose and can't participate in this, you are showing them how they can. You're providing a way for them to be able to, and I think that's meaningful. The other option in pairing there is the limited purpose FSA. And that is for your dental and vision expenses. I just had the opportunity to use mine to get LASIK. And so I think your opportunity there is, number 1, offering it. Number 2, make sure they're educated on what's covered. Next here, let's talk about wellness programs. I know a lot of employers offer these, and I think they're great to potentially align with an HSA contribution. Really helps to establish the right habits within your organization, healthy habits for your employees. But one of the problems that I've seen, or a bit of advice I'd give you on those wellness contributions, is if you're in a calendar year plan, so benefits for 2020, make it so they have to complete certain activities or achieve a certain level, and that's what earns them their contribution from you in the year 2023. I guarantee you'll have a lot less problems with people accidentally over-contributing to their HSA.
Mm-hmm.
The next idea here is salary-based contributions. So this doesn't go along with treating all of your employees the same, but it might make sense for some organizations. Please note that this must be defined in your Section 125 plan. Discrimination cannot be in favor of the highly comped employees. So if you'll notice here, we gave a higher contribution to our lower wage earners and decreased that contribution as their wages increase or we see the higher salary tiers. And so you may ask the question, will this upset my highly comped employees? And what I have to say is maybe not. They may be looking for ways that they can reduce their taxable income through pre-tax contributions. And it may make them feel good that some of their lower wage earning associates that they depend on are being well taken care of. I also want to introduce HSA Advance to you. This concept we offer here at Pinnacle. Pinnacle offers it to their associates, but it's the ability to advance the employee's annual election to them. And then they have that money. It maybe feels a little bit more like an FSA because they have all the funds at the beginning of the year. If they do have something that comes up or a surgery maybe that they have to have, those funds are there in advance for them to begin using. There's lots more details to share on this. I would caution this does create more risk for the company on how you're going to recoup those funds if the person quits. But if this is something that you are interested in discussing, you can reach out to one of our advisors for more information. Next, and probably one of my favorites on here is matching. I will tell you, I work with a lot of different groups, bringing new groups on board all the time to help them with their pre-tax advantage accounts. And the one thing that I feel like I just don't see enough is employers creating a match. You match their 401k, why not their HSA? It's a retirement tool too. So if that's something you haven't thought about, I definitely encourage you to do so. Also want to mention seed money. If you're offering a high deductible health plan for the first time, it's always a good idea to get them off to a good start, and it really helps them to pay attention a little bit more as well if you're putting some seed money into their HSA accounts. Next here, reinvest the savings. So if you saved money on that high deductible health plan, consider reinvesting it back into your employees' HSAs. I also wanted to mention that as I find different ways that brokers are helping their employer groups get more creative with their benefits and find ways to save money as they keep seeing insurance costs on the rise. I do see a lot of employers looking at self-funded plans and reference-based pricing. So that's something to note, an area that you may look into to where you could experience some savings. Next year, take a look at those RX and other healthcare savings tool. Work with your broker on those. Find tools that will help make savvy shoppers. You know, the general idea, I think, with high deductible health plans and HSAs is that they'd, you know, kind of vet or shop around before they got a procedure done or, you know, went to the doctor for something specific. And I don't think we've seen enough of that, but I have seen some tools emerge that I think that we can create that trend if we give them the tools to do so. Next year, last year, educate. This is a year-round effort. Videos, lunch and learns, do it at open enrollment, do it outside of open enrollment, send emails, have benefit champions. It creates goodwill for your employees. It helps with their financial wellness, all sorts of benefits, but they're not always paying attention, so sometimes you have to do it more than once a year. Kevin, we'll turn back to you. I've just shared several strategies. Which ones get you most excited and feel that employers may be overlooking?
Well, this is just me, but I like the idea of everyone being in the same boat together, and we can dredge up the old part where Columbus burned his ships when he got to the New World precisely to incent creativity among the crew. And so my first recommendation is think carefully about offering choices because you're about to give all kinds of choices just through the HSA, and you describe several of them. I'd also point out you've got a number of flexible strategies here. So whether you're in the manufacturing sector or the knowledge economy, there's something for everyone here. In other words, we can tailor a program to meet the needs of people who may not be as book savvy as others. A difference, for example, educate is required across this entire platform, but how you educate is very different if you're talking to a law firm versus talking to, say, a chain restaurant team. It could be a different kind of message every time. I have noticed this, though, and it's generational, which is if you have younger children, they're on these things all the time. And that's reasonable because that's where you find the answers to your big question. Where are the savings tools? And it's an amazing thing. Maybe I'm just old, but it's been an amazing thing to watch other people look through these phones, find, for example, GoodRx and some of those other savings tools for prescription drugs. I've seen a number of other services for diagnostics. You know, what about an MRI? What does it cost? What about testing services? What do they cost? There can be some camaraderie built in the shared experience of employees talking to each other about the kinds of tools they've put together to manage their family. And I think you want to encourage that. And you can do that by having lunch and learns where people talk about their experiences, but you can do it and combine several of these strategies, which is we're going to have a wellness meeting. It probably means about $100 extra contribution to you. If you can show up at the meeting and prove that you did something through the year that merits the contribution in the first place. And while you're there, you have a chance to point out to them this is where you are, this is where you could be going. Are you sure you're not missing out? We don't want anybody to leave money on the table. And then you have to mean that. And I think I think that changes the culture in your company. Back to where we started the conversation, it's about doing something for your employees. They're not used to that. And so if you can change the mood around employee benefits, you can change the mood in your whole company, because there's absolutely nothing more valuable to every human being than knowing you've got an account and it's full of cash and it's all yours and your employer's putting more money in it. The only thing you need is a sophisticated administrator like Pinnacle to make sure all these parts mash. And so that's the thing you need. That's the thing you're going to need to get down the highway as an employer.
Well, thank you for that, Kevin. And I next just want to remind everybody, HSAs come with easy administration. They are participant-owned accounts. The participant maintains responsibility for compliance. So they're the ones that have to hold on to all those receipts and aren't having to submit them through the claims adjudication process like they may with the FSA or HRA. So you get no substantiation escalations, no forfeiture of funds, where at the end of the year, if somebody's like, oh my gosh, I didn't spend the money that I set aside, that's okay. With an HSA, they just keep rolling over. You can also change contributions and elections every 30 days, so nobody gets stuck. They have a lot of flexibility. If somebody's budget changes, they can increase, decrease. If they have a medical event that they weren't expecting and they want to make sure it passes through their HSA, it gives them the ability to do so. They can also
just one comment there on the substantiation escalations. You know, people would much rather go through essentially unanesthetized denture work than have a problem with the IRS. And so just in a random sample of members of the board, all those administrators, we know that about 96% of all of the transactions in HSAs are essentially on its face qualified medical expenses. In other words, if you were an employer and you were worried about poor behavior, bad choices, first of all, it's not your responsibility, to your point. But second of all, it very rarely happens. Doesn't mean it doesn't happen. It just happens very, very rarely because of the tools, again, the tools that are out there, like electronic shoeboxes for all of these receipts that you can keep. Very useful if someone's trying to figure out how to prove over time, if they ever were asked to prove over time that they were entitled to those deductions. Just an aside, sorry to interrupt.
Oh, no, you're good. Thank you for interrupting. And then for that last one there, I have less risk. There maybe should be no risk, but they can only spend the deposited funds. So as compared to an FSA where they could go out day one of the new plan year and spend their whole election and then quit a couple days later, with HSAs, they can only spend what has been deposited. So all, I think, great reasons just to simplify what you're doing there with your benefits and to support your employees. I think less escalations with HSAs is the message here. Now, I hope we've shared a powerful side of the employer perspective on HSAs and how you can put them to work. Definitely encourage you all to, take a look at the benefits that you're offering and make sure that if you're not offering a high deductible health plan, to see if that would fit your organization. And if you currently are, maybe consider some of the things you've learned today on what you might do differently. I think that this strategy definitely helps to promote your employees' mental, physical, and financial wellness. And quite honestly, as we'll see in this next slide, that is what is important to people today. So what's important to employees post-pandemic is that their healthcare benefits, and we'll skip past remote work because of course everybody wants that, but we'll see how much that continues. But number two here, financial wellness. Both are important to people, and I think that through this strategy that we're sharing today, this is a unique way to approach it and really help your employees in both areas. So we'll see here on this screen, the average retiree could need as much as $150,000 for healthcare and medical expenses in retirement. The example up here just shows the estimated spend of a couple in retirement at $280,000. Of course, the amount you will need will depend on when you retire, how healthy you are, and how long you live. The amount you will need also will depend on which accounts you use to pay for your health care, for example, 401k, HSA, or IRA. You know, it wasn't too long ago that I first saw these numbers, and they were pretty shocking to me and scary too, at how much more I needed to save to prepare for the medical expenses in retirement. Kevin, what are your thoughts on this? I mean, I probably can't retire for another 20, 30 years. How important is it going to be to have HSA savings then? And are employers helping to make employees aware enough to prepare enough?
Well, two interesting questions. Retirement should start to concern you earlier rather than later. And obviously, if you're 24 years old, not much concerns you. That's too bad, because that's a very good time to start the savings, the muscle memory that goes with savings. And there's a lot of people around here at the American Bankers Association, including me, that wander around giving the dad speech, we call it, about the miracle of compound interest. And so saving a little for a long time will get you to the goal you want to achieve. But if that doesn't do it, and there's no reason why it should, I have children that age, they don't save. I'm trying to dent that, of course. But think about this. Let's take your number of 30 years. 30 years ago, it was 1992. Bill Clinton was about to be elected president. There were about 100 million fewer Americans at the time. And even then, there were the first start of warnings from Social Security trustees, from Medicare. You know, we're going to have a problem shortly. Well, that problem's here. That problem is this decade. This is when the number of active workers and the number of retirees moves from a terrible place, 3 workers to 1 retiree, to less than 3, which is the definition of the problem in Social Security. This is why you want to save money. About 68% of Americans that retire list Social Security as their main source of income. Okay, do you want to be in that group, or do you want to be the group, as I said, where you've got a health plan that's actually doing some of this work for you? Bright line test, and this is the chance to help yourself. This is the chance for employers to be seen to be helping their employees. And I think those numbers on this slide are about right. I think that's what it's going to cost. And I want to point out something as well that we saw in the pandemic. Did you notice that everyone was expecting an antidote quickly? And that's the old joke about our country. We want it free. We want it yesterday. Okay, well, that means we're living longer, but the cost of the next medical evolution at the margin is exponentially higher than the last one. How are you going to access it? Well, you're going to access it through the money that you've saved. So if you don't have this, I seriously wonder how you might explain not being able to have a plan like this available to your employees in the future if they know the same information that I just gave you. In other words, if you like the comfort of reaching into your wallet for $20 so you can go to the doctor and do your copay, that's great. What happens later? And no one ever seems to talk about that. And so we've made a concerted effort to start that discussion. We're in our 18th year of having the discussion. Hopefully we're making a dent. I think you've made all the right points, and I hope folks understand, again, this is the thing that younger employees are absolutely clamoring for, because I think they perceive correctly that there's been some mismanagement, that the older generations were larger, perhaps took more of our national resources. They're going to have to look out for themselves more, and they're looking for employers as partners in that endeavor. And that's why their benefits are going to look different than the ones that, say, our grandfathers or fathers had.
Thank you, Kevin, which brings us to my favorite chart. An HSA is a retirement account. And so we are running short on time, so I'm going to start wrapping things up. But the moral of the story with this chart is that you can see the HSA is the only one that carries all three check marks. And, you know, I think that the last thing that you want to try to have happen, so to prepare yourself for, is to not have to take money for medical expenses out of your 401k or some of these other retirement accounts. Be thinking strategically and try to set enough aside in your HSA to cover those expenses. And guess what? If you set too much aside, you can, at age 65, penalty drops off, and so taking money out of your HSA for non-qualified expenses is going to look just like taking it out of your 401k.
Yes, that's right.
Next, just quickly want to share these last examples. So we've talked about HSAs in here, these last few slides, in terms of retirement, but they're also meaningful today. And so in this example, we see Angela, who is contributing or paying her expenses without an HSA. So that money is coming out post-tax. And then here on the right, where it's coming out pre-tax, and that's keeping an additional $1,200 in Angela's pocket. That's important. That's meaningful, showing your employees a pathway to do that and making sure at least their daily expenses, if they're not able to save for retirement, that at least their daily expenses are passing through their HSA. Because we honed in on that dependent care example, same concept here, but that's an additional $900 that if somebody makes that FSA dependent care contribution that they keep in their pocket. So important to note that they're meaningful for today, and they're meaningful for the future for your employees, and a great place to invest in education and help their financial wellness. Just to reiterate, given the triple tax advantages, HSAs can not only be a great savings vehicle for medical expenses, but they can be a great enhancement for your retirement planning. HSAs should be an overall part of your financial plan, and your investment should align with other investment accounts, such as 401k from an asset allocation perspective. There's no minimum distribution requirements. You don't have to start making withdrawals at a certain age. From an estate planning perspective, if married and your spouse is the beneficiary, he or she will retain the preferred tax status. We encourage you to save your receipts. Some people may be fortunate enough to let their HSA dollars grow and cash those receipts in later. You know, you may need to pull that money out, or maybe you want to use it for a different purpose, but big reminder, keep your receipts. I think, you know, for the most part, we're at the end of the presentation. I have another slide in there just to remind you to educate. Fern, I don't know if we have any questions, or Kevin, if you have any final thoughts, but I know we're getting close to time, so I want to start wrapping up.
Oh, well, I can do this. I can offer a warranty. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, this is like the Kevin and Laura show, and I've answered the questions individually, and hopefully everybody can see the public Q&A, but we're happy, you know, just send us an email if you have questions. It's health@pnfp.com. One of these questions just like hit me hard on like my passion, which is the most nerdy passion, which is non-discrimination testing. So I'm about to nerd out on you, Bob, in an email. But go ahead, Kevin.
No, I was just going to say, if you had a question, get in touch with Pinnacle. We'd be happy to answer it for you. That's our job. And so if there's anything we can do to help, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So again, I think education is key, education throughout the year. I continue to see, I have a friend that worked at that Fortune 50 company that I was talking to, probably it's been about a year and a half, 2 years back, and she wasn't maxing out her HSA and totally had the ability to. So even, you know, in the top to the, you know, to the largest to the smallest company, I think there's areas of opportunity for people to learn more, and I think that we would be doing our employees an injustice if we didn't put more emphasis around this. So thank you all for joining today. We really appreciate it, and please reach out if you have any questions.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. Thanks. Thank you, Kevin, again.